In the model of Kronos and Ananke, we see the opposition of male active force with female passive force. Ananke is the world axis, and Cronus symbolizes the apparent circular motion of the cosmos, as evinced in the precession of the equinoxes. Another opposition is Semite and Indo-European. Japheth and similar names like Jephthah, Joseph, Jehoshaphat symbolize the European language. This is a hugely important point to grasp because it links the Bible with the earliest written traditions, like the Gilgamesh epic. Noah's grandson is Yavan, the mythic father of the Greeks. This Western identity is repeated with parallel names like Jonah and John. Over half the world's people speak a Proto-Indo-European language. Scholars have overlooked an important linguistic approach, largely due to academic bias and inertia. Conversely, names like Simon and Shem point to Semitic language speakers. So what you see when you know to look for it is the opposition of East and West, or Semite and European, in an early form. Another important opposition is that of city versus country, as evinced by Gilgamesh, city king, and Enkidu, countryman. We might mention Jesus, king of the Jews, and John, wilderness preacher. Similarly, Josephus and Bannus symbolize city man and country teacher or holy man, which turns out to be a really bad idea in Enkidu's case. Okay, because King Gilgamesh's country advisor, all of his interpretations turn out badly. He keeps interpreting omens, and everything just goes downhill from there, and they kind of lose and lose, he and the king, once they've teamed up and gone out into the wilderness to make a name for themselves. I suggest the epic's ancient Mesopotamian authors don't really think much of omens or their interpreters as a means of deciding human actions, and I would agree with that. You will see this rhetorical device of city versus country, civilization versus the wild, when Enkidu learns to drink wine and eat bread, those civilized foods that remain in the Christian Eucharist. My problem with biblical scholarship is exactly summed up in these short examples. Scholarship has ignored these important fundamental themes in the Bible, despite their importance to interpreting the historical context. There is a continuity of these oppositions since the earliest religious epics. Another problem with biblical scholarship is that scholars have overclassified mythic characters, artificially separating humans from demigods and demigods from high gods, like Heracles and Baal, for instance. We need only check with Bel Melkart, who is a very famous Baal in antiquity, and a famous Heracles as mythic king of Tyre. So when you realize that Apollo is a Baal, you can make a big step forward. Scholars have simply overclassified the differences between characters like this and overstressed the differences while ignoring the similarities. The hero's job is always to push the limits of what humans can do, and this is where they end up struggling with the gods. Instead of following the leads of scholars like Robert Eisenman, whom I understand has found another James and John, try seeing the opposition of James and John, or Jesus and John, as summer and winter, as civilized and wild, as city and country, and you can also see opposition of East and West in these. And you should see Osiris and Seth as a similar opposition, or Baal and Yam, city king versus wild sea god. And the sea is the great serpent of winter, which is often seen as slain or defeated by the civilized king of heaven. He's the up-and-coming king, and indeed, Baal attains the kingship in the old myths from Mesopotamia and Ugarit. Now you can read the Bible differently than you have been reading it, because you can see traditional oppositions the experts have overlooked. They generally keep looking to the same authorities and they keep getting the same lack of results. Scholars have focused on historiographical approaches when they should have focused on thematic and symbolic interpretation through comparative mythology and on parallel naming in myth generally. Because this is where you find out that many of the mythic characters that we talk about actually have antecedent characters that were out there in the greater mythology the whole time. We're just not familiar with what myths they're in. Thank you, and please subscribe to Magic Jesus channel, as I don't show any ads and I don't ask you for any money, but I do need support or the channel's not going to reach very many people. Thank you.